Welcome to the Tuning In podcast, where we talk alignment, intuition, and our internal guidance system. We cover woo-woo topics in an approachable and practical way. I'm your host, Dana Evans of Alignful.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tuning In podcast. This is episode 115. So, I recently had a challenging day. We'll just say that. And it was like kind of dramatic. And the funny thing is, I was reflecting with a friend about it and sharing my gratitudes for how much I have shifted in my ability to process and handle challenging things. And the interesting thing about this challenging day was that none of the stuff, we'll say, was mine. So I wasn't personally going through anything, but there were 3 people around me that were having really challenging times. And so this is kind of what inspired this episode, is this idea that it might not be yours to handle and to process and to fix. And for me, that has been a big lesson and learning experience over the years of where does my responsibility end? What am I in charge of processing, fixing, handling? Right? Who do I need to protect and save and overly invest my energy into? And when do I not need to overly invest my energy? And that's really the bigger question, because I've noticed in myself that absolutely my tendency is to get overly invested and want to fix and solve and help and protect and get worried, upset, indignant on other people's behalf. Do you relate to this? Part of the game of self-awareness is we get to see all sides of ourselves, right? We get to see when we're thriving, when we're in the light side, and we get to see when we're in kind of the shadow side of our beings, right? Our essences. And I think there's a lot of expectation and societal standards that are placed upon us that we take on as our own without really recognizing that we don't have to take this on. And for me, one of those things is if something goes wrong, I'm the one who needs to fix it. And this happens with John a lot, where like if he's having a challenge or a struggle, I literally want to say, here's what you need to do. Here, okay, but here's what you should do. You should be feeling this way. You should, right? Oh my gosh, I certainly don't want people to do that to me when I am struggling. And yet I have a tendency to do that with John. And what I found is the place it's coming from is actually, it's like not a strong place that's coming from. It comes from this idea that, oh my gosh, I need to fix this or nothing will get fixed. And a lot of times I jump in that way without an invitation. And what I've found is that if I'm doing something without an invitation, #projector, then it's an energetic drain, and it's also often not well received. So if I go in and say, here's what you should do, here's what I'm telling you, follow this, there's a good chance that John will say, he'll either fight back or write it off or just keep going down his path of talking, and then I'll feel annoyed that he's not taking my uninvited advice. And I think that plays out a lot of times in our partnerships. I know it plays out often with men and women in particular, of like that masculine need to fix. But if you're a woman in a masculine feminine relationship, right, with a male partner, notice too, oh, do I also try to take over and fix? Because ladies, I feel this way, and and maybe this can happen with anyone else, but I can just only speak to my experience with John, my husband. But it very much bothers me when I'm just trying to express my feelings and he tries to tell me how to fix what's going on. Sometimes I want help fixing, and in that case, I'll ask him. Sometimes I just need space held for me so I can express. And so when I see that same dynamic playing out with me trying to fix John, it's a good exercise to catch myself and recognize, oh my gosh, I don't like it when he does this to me. Why would I want to do it to him? Plus, it's a lot of excess energy that I don't need to be putting into this. Instead, what does it look like for me to just step back and receive and let him share and process, and then step in only if invited? And it's such an easier way to operate for me when I can do that. However, conditioning and my past has brought me to that default reaction of, oh, I need to step in and fix this. So being able to catch yourself in those moments or right after them and have awareness is really freaking powerful. And where this relates to this idea of, is this mine, is my challenging day. I was talking to 3 different people, and each one was having kind of a bit of a crisis. And what I recognized was I was trying to take their crisis on as my own. And then what happened was I was feeling internal pressure to fix them and to solve their problems on their behalf. And I can feel as I'm sharing that, this tightness in my chest of that pressure, that responsibility, that expectation to fix. And so I actually messaged one of my coach friends and I said, okay, this is what's happening. And it's really exhausting me. And I'm getting really worked up. I'm talking about this and pouring all this energy into this thing on behalf of other people. And she reminded me of that simple process of, what does it look like if you don't take this on? What if it's not your job to fix it? What if all you need to do right now is step back and receive and allow them to share and process? What if that's all they need right now? What if they don't need or want or desire you to fix things? What if they just want to be heard and have a safe place to share what's happening? What a relief. It's such an ego thing that we immediately think that our job is to fix other people's problems. And of course, we want to help the people in our lives. And of course, we don't want them to be struggling and going through pain. But it is not always our job to try to resolve something. And for one of the people, I was like, you know what? I can see where I'm getting so defensive and uptight on their behalf naturally. When you love someone, when you care about people in your lives, you do want to defend and protect them. But I saw in the bigger picture, right? I was able to zoom out from the small nitty gritty of the experience. I was able to zoom out and say, oh, there's a pattern within this person, and this is playing out right now. And wherever there's a pattern that plays out, regardless of how painful it is, there's also a lesson within that. And it is not my job as a friend, right, as a family member, as a partner, it is not my job to teach them the lesson. And it is certainly not my job, nor is it possible to tell them how to learn the lesson or to learn the lesson for them. It's their lesson to learn. It's their experience. One of my mentors and coaches, James Wedmore, who I am a coach for in his Business by Design program. So James Wedmore, he had a call with his coaches and he was talking to us. And he said, very frankly, he said, when you're coaching, you do not want to be in it with the person. You want to be able to hold the candle for the possibility for that person. And it reminds me of the quote. Who says this quote? Is it Einstein, that's a good guess, right? Is you cannot solve the problem from the level of the problem. You can't be poor enough to make other people rich. You can't be depressed enough to make other people happy. You can't be trapped enough to help other people experience freedom, right? We can't solve the problem from the level of the problem. So in a coaching situation, but I just took that and applied it to most relationship situations, is I don't need to drop to the level of pain that the other person is in order to help them. I also don't need to get them out of their pain. Like, hello, emotional feeling and clearing coach, right? The pain and the experience of emotions that they're in is valid. And I think it's so interesting, right? Because our natural desires with people that we love and care about is we want them to get out of the pain. And this is what I was experiencing. I was like, well, I'm mad on this person's behalf. I want them out of the pain because I don't want them to have to feel pain. I want to protect them. So what can I do to fix this so they're out of their pain? But see, that in itself is denying them their own experience. It's denying them their own emotional processing. It's denying them to ride their own emotional wave and denying them the lesson that is ultimately coming from their pain. And I just love thinking about it in that way. And it's so important for me to share this on the podcast because, one, can you see yourself in this? And two, can you see you doing it for yourself? Right? When I talk with clients, one of the most common things I hear is that when they experience an undesired emotion, their first thought is, how do I get out of this? How do I stop this? How do I fix this? There's something inherently wrong with this emotion. But what if the emotion in itself is exactly what you need to feel, to experience, to embrace, to allow? What if that's actually the path to fixing, right? It's the through to get you to the other side. But what do we want to do typically is we want to frog leap the through, the pain, the discomfort, the undesired emotions, and we want to just get to the insight, the awareness, the good stuff that's on the other side. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we don't frog leap because anything you avoid, anything you put off, anything you push down never truly goes away, right? It just gets pushed aside until it comes up again. And usually every time you push it away, push it down, run from it, it gets a little bit bigger, gets a little bit louder. It gets a little bit more intense the next time it shows up. Because ultimately, our bodies want to be able to experience the full range of emotions. And as you become more ninja level in actually feeling and processing these emotions, you can ride them very quickly. And that's what my experience was yesterday. So I went from like heightened activation of I need to fix and protect, these people shouldn't be in pain. Literally, it manifests physically in my upper traps and my upper back. So I wasn't aware of it in the moment, but then I left to go on a walk and I was like, oh, goodness gracious, my traps are sore and my upper back is like burning. That's the body speaking, right? It's like getting into defense mode. And so I'm like, okay, I need to do my own work. Of course, these are emotions flaring up. These aren't my emotions. I'm carrying this on behalf of someone else. And I know that the way that I can help them best is by stepping back, holding space, right? Holding that higher perspective of being out of the problem because it's not my problem, right? I'm not in it. I don't need to get in it with them. I can step out and come to that calm clarity, that neutrality of not being heightened or activated. But in order to do that, I need to feel the emotions that are coming up. This is the work. This is the work, my friends. And it's nice and easy to hear me talk about it, I'm sure. But let me tell you, when you're in a heightened, activated state, doing the things that I'm going to tell you about right now, that is not easy. Because the ego, the mind is so activated and it's so in its I'm right, I need to fix this standpoint. I mean, just think about if you're in an argument, right, with a friend or your partner. Think about how hard it is to take a breath, step away, to concede, to soften. And that's similar when we're in this experience of taking on someone else's emotions. Like your ego mind has activated and it wants to hold on to that righteousness with all of its might. And so these practices that I did yesterday, they all soften the grip on the ego, anchor you back into self, to your essence, connect you to the bigger picture, right? Your inner voice, and allow you to release that intense anger, that intense sensation and emotion that isn't even yours, and step into that clarity. So my first step was to get out of the house and go on a walk. And what I did on that walk, first and foremost, was brought myself back to nature. So what do I hear? What do I see? What do I taste? What do I smell? Like, get back to your senses. And nature in particular, you can do that in your home as well. But if you can get outside, nature in itself is going to be very grounding and bringing you back. It was beautiful. I went on a walk. I heard the crunching gravel beneath my feet. I saw some frogs leaping in the pond and they went, wah! They made the funniest sound. It wasn't your normal frog sound. They went, wah! And like leapt. It was so cute. And that just like made me laugh. I placed my hand on a tree. I took a deep breath of the fresh air. And then I made my way over to a bench that overlooks a pond. And I was like, okay, this is the part I hate the most. I need to breathe. Because when we get in that heightened reactive state, we're not breathing. The breath is like, it's very shallow, and you're lucky if it even gets into the lungs. It usually stays right around the throat and the upper lungs. So that's not a grounded breath. Like, just think if you start breathing like that, right? It's like panting, right? It's not very restorative. That's a very activating breath. So in order to get to a more restorative breath, we need to bring it down. So breathing all the way down into my low ribs and literally picturing them expanding outward, side to side. So versus just the chest rising, imagine the entire rib cage is expanding circumferentially in all directions, all the way down to the lowest ribs, into the belly. So I took a few deep expanding breaths, and my exhales were like, letting it all out. Notice that the tendency is to take a big inhale and a short exhale, like, but we want to move the breath all the way out, just like we move the breath all the way in. So I took a few of those. Now I'm yawning. That's always a good sign of the settling of the nervous system. Even in that moment, me taking 3 breaths with you, my body is like, oh, we're here. And then I actually did 5 minutes of breath work in what is called conscious connected breath. And I just did a 13-day breath experience with, it's called the Breath Club. And one of my teachers, Alicia Jane, she held this. And so I just followed that process, which is a continuous breath for 5 minutes. And I cannot tell you how much my mind resists this. And yet how impactful it is, even if I just do 5 minutes. And so all you do is through your nose or your mouth, you just breathe in and out without pausing in between. And so it would sound like this. I'll link to a video on this. And you do that for 5 minutes or more. And my body starts to tense up because what you're doing in these exhales and this breath is you're shedding and you're letting go. But the body doesn't want to, right? It doesn't want to soften. So the most challenging thing is to get through that heightened state of, oh my God, this is too much. I can't do this. It can even feel a little panicky. And then you tip over to the other side where you get into the flow of it. And you might notice your hands tense up, your lips could pucker and tense up, your inner thighs, different parts of the body might grip. But the more you into those exhales, the more the body starts to soften. So I did that for 5 minutes only because that's all my mind was so resistant. Then I laid down on the bench and just softened into regular breathing and looked up at the sky. And I was so entranced by the clouds, the puffy white clouds, the blue sky, the birds flying above me, the chirping, the frogs, the slithering sound in the grass. It totally settled me. And I just lay there for quite a bit. I could feel the sun on my skin, the soft breeze. And it was so nice. And just that was enough to ground me. And from that grounding place is where I had this awareness that I'm sharing with you today of, oh my gosh, look at how much I took on of others that was not mine. They didn't ask it to be mine. They didn't hand it to me. They just wanted to share. And I took it all on, tried to become responsible for their experience, felt the pressure and need to fix it, and then actually was annoyed with them for creating these problems for me. But that's not what any of these people were trying to do. They were just sharing. And so that just helped me soften and like even laugh at this. Like, oh my gosh, look at this default pattern that I have. And I think this is a Deepak Chopra saying, but one of my meditation teachers years ago used to say, for every scenario, you can either be amazed or amused. And it really softens the ego when we look at things from that standpoint, because our tendency is judgment, right? Like I could look at that pattern and be like, God, why do I freaking do that? Like, look at me trying to fix everyone's problems. Like, here I go again. Like, what is wrong with me? Or I can look at it and just laugh and be amused. Like, oh, mind, look at you running a mind pattern. Like, I see you. It's okay. This isn't our responsibility. We don't have to take this on. And it's so much gentler when we can see that amusement or amazement in ourselves versus the criticism and the harsh judgment. And so from there, I continued on my walk. I then shared this and some of my insights with my friend who I had ranted to early in the morning. So I went from like rant and frustration and like heightened emotion and like, gotta handle all of this, like that vibrating energy, to the more grounded, softer, reflective Dana, who could see things from that higher perspective, the bigger picture. And then I went home and I did have to be conscious and present in that day and just watch when that cycle, that pattern tried to rear up again, and then literally exhale it out. I did some tapping. You know, I love, love, love tapping. And even when I was on my walk, I was just walking and tapping on my collarbone, right below my collarbone. I do that when there's a lot of emotion moving, even when I'm on calls with clients. Sometimes I just start doing a little tapping on my own body to help remind my body, you don't need to take this on. You don't need to absorb this. Keep it moving. And then that evening, I did my favorite practice to clear energy. And sometimes when I have a lot of client calls going on and I'm working a lot with other people, I tend to do this every night, is I do a shaking practice. And I literally just start like right before I go into bed. I just start with a little bit of pulsing and breathing. Sometimes you make noise like, and just start pulsing, and then more, and shaking, and then maybe shaking your hands, and then maybe stepping side to side. And then sometimes I get into that really intense, like stomping, shaking, wiggling. Just move the energy. Our bodies are holding energy. It gets so stuck during the day, especially if we're just sitting right at a desk all day, or not getting a ton of movement, or holding our breath, right? Or if you're pushing emotions down, like all of that traps energy, and we need to move it out. So that shaking at the end of the day, and like, sometimes I wake up the next morning and like my legs are sore, my muscles are sore, and sometimes I break a sweat in the shaking, and you just shake and get it out like a crazy person. And then after you're done shaking, you kind of slow down the shaking and bring yourself back to a gentle pulsing, pulsing, pulsing. And then I always close my eyes, open my palms out while I'm standing. You can also lie down if it's too much to stand. And then I just feel. And you can feel the vibration in your body. You can feel the energy settling. And just watch and notice. And that is when, at that point, and this also happens to me right after the breath work, my inner voice just starts sharing. And one of the things my inner voice said, I have to be honest, I wasn't fully open to hearing all that my inner voice wanted to share. So I only listened to a little bit. That sometimes happens. It's okay. And the essence of what it was saying is, fear is not going to get you the result that you desire. So shake it out, soften away from the fear. Come back to us, for we are always near. We are always here. We're here to see you. We're here to watch you. We're here to love you. We're here to give love, to spread love, to be love, to hold love for you to hold love for others. For that is the bigger picture. That is the greater sight to see. Join our hands, you and me, and look how settled and calm and beautiful life can be. My inner voice loves to sneak in while I'm recording these podcasts because my guard is down. So apparently that's my message for me and for you from my inner voice, and a really beautiful lesson of not needing to take everything on as my own. If I do, and if I have, if you do, if you have, those are some really simple practices that you can do to come back to yourself. So, what are the practices? Notice your surroundings. So, engage your senses. So, what do you see, hear, feel, taste, and smell? Get out in nature. Moving the body. So, for me, that was a walk. Breath work. This is the conscious connected breath. Pausing in stillness. So I just laid on the bench and watched the sky and the nature and listened, right? I reactivated my senses. Sharing, right? Sharing verbally with a safe person is always wonderful. And especially if you rant to them, may I also recommend you share your insights with them so they receive the completion cycle as well, and you don't just emotionally dump on them. That's been a big practice for me. And then shaking, doing a full body shake, shaking, rocking, swaying, dancing, just letting the body wiggle and move to release any excess trapped emotion. And then again, you anchor that in stillness, in the feeling deeply of all the sensations in your body, and listening to the messages that are coming through. With that, I hope you have a really beautiful, grounded day. Thank you, as always, for listening. And I would love to hear if you bring these practices into a heightened situation and how you feel. And as always, if you're feeling like you don't have access or your mind is unwilling to bring you into your emotional processing, please let me know. I would love to hold a single session for you where we can do it together for 90 minutes. Gives the mind plenty of space to share what its fears are, what it needs to share, let its drama out. And then we get into the body and we get into the inner voice. And you literally process those emotions on the fly and move them out so that they're not lingering and bogging you down anymore. And then you get to listen to the wisdom of your inner voice from that place. And of course, if you want to have the ninja level experience where you literally emerge as a brand new person, it's like going from being a caterpillar in the cocoon to a butterfly, then join me for the Insight 3-month program. It's the most magical experience that I can offer. And if you are a coach and you have a group, whether it's a mastermind or a group program or a course, and your people are feeling kind of stuck in their feels, you can always invite me to lead an emotional feeling and clearing session for them so that they can move through the feelings, have a process that they can do on their own, and then be more receptive to your teachings, right? And what you offer within the program so their emotions aren't blocking them from receiving. So those are the ways to work with me right now. And you can also sign up for the vitamin D newsletter where I share some of what we talk about on the podcast and then just other fun insights, fun things that I'm loving right now and ways for you to get back into your body. So the links for all of that are in the show notes below. And until next time, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tuning In podcast. As always, if this would resonate with anyone you know, please share the episode. You can follow along with my journey on Instagram at Dana_Evans or find me on my website at alignful.com.